It's the higher awareness. The higher awareness is like, well, damn, that was uncomfortable, but now we know what not to do, and now we know this has brought in all these other experiences. But then the other part of my brain wants to rehash it, I guess, almost make it dramatic. And sometimes it's really a struggle between the two. And yeah, I mean, what you resist persists 100%. And I know Eckhart Tolle, and I talk about him on the show every single episode, but he's my man. And, I'm very aware that it's happening, but sometimes it's just really difficult to kind of quiet that down. So does that mean that the emotion hasn't been released, or does that mean that there's some kind of remnants that I just need to try to look at objectively, a little bit like you were kind of talking about earlier, objectively?
Absolutely. So it's a very good question, because I used to wake up in the middle of the night, kind of like replaying a lot
remember
of
when you screwed up? Right.
Yeah, remember when you spoke to that person like that, and you said something and you're really clumsy and you didn't mean that, and you hurt their. So now it took me a lot of practice in kind of like, it's observing the thought, seeing that it's there, and giving yourself grace and saying, okay, yeah, I did do that. Yeah, absolutely. I did do that. But what do I do? You can't go back and change the past, but what you can do is change the present. And the way you change the present is to action differently. So becoming an observant in awareness that, okay, that thought is then go, no, ego. Because the ego, a lot of the time we reject the ego. We make the ego bad. But what we have to do is educate the ego and saying, okay, yeah, that was the old programming that I used to do, but now I'm choosing to do it this way. And it's kind of like, it's about how you change it today and changing the thought forms. So catching it right at the beginning, going, yeah, okay,
I did do that.
We're changing it. Yeah. It's like, stop. And sometimes I'd, even if it was playing a lot, because we are reprogramming. This is like thought program that we had for such a long time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like stepping out of it. If there is emotion still attached to the trauma, there's still something underlying that needs to be resolved or brought to the surface. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you. That's helpful. I find it frustrating sometimes. And I'm very aware that, when I feel superior and fear, it's ego. And I know that my ego is important. And I do talk to her sometimes nicely, but sometimes I just get so wrapped up in the thoughts going around that I forget I can change them. And I teach people how to do this. It's kind of like what you were talking about earlier, when you should do your own stuff, but it's really easy to tell other people what they need to do instead.